Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening. Welcome, ironradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I'm a licensed nutritionist, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I run Strength Guild, which we are moving right now to the bigger side. The Barbell Open, which is going on right now, you have until Sunday evening at midnight to put in your snatch. So first week is snatch. You still have time. You can sign up if you're doing Olympic weightlifting before Sunday night. And then next week is clean and jerk, and then powerlifting. So you still have a little while to join powerlifting if you're a powerlifter. So
awesome. This is Dr. John Mike. I'm a professor in exercise science, writer, speaker, strongman competitor, and I am on the St. Louis Tandem Hide and Seek team, and I think we're in the semifinals. So.
Tandem Hide and Seek.
Nice. So, Phil, tell me about the gym. I mean, I'm surprised you moved to their side because you had the one side built up so nice.
Well, I needed more room. So
mm-hmm.
Yeah, we ran out of room. So the other side is about, it's roughly twice the size. So, yeah, we got everything. It's about 3/4 of the way moved. And that's going in. We're finishing the bottom part, which will be open. That's just going to be nothing but chin-up bars and just floors of mats. And then there's going to be a space that's 110 feet long by about 8 feet wide to run sleds and yokes and stuff like that.
Indoor stuff, yeah.
So we're able to do that in all weather.
Right.
Because that slows down in the winter when we can't go out and take over the street. And then upstairs, directly above the new part of the gym, is going to be batting cages and fielding for, sporting events.
Right. That wasn't even part of the original plan, was it?
No, that's going in now though. So that's in works now.
Cool.
But, yep, that's what's happening.
All right. So, we've got a little bit of news, everybody, and our topic of the day, and John doesn't even know this yet, but I can throw this kind of stuff at these guys and they're fine. We're going to talk about bringing up lagging muscles, bringing up lagging body parts.
Nice.
But on with the news here.
Strength and muscle sport news.
I have one piece on genetics and gene doping and that sort of thing. And John has a piece on caffeine. Do you have that in front of you, John? Or
I do.
Okay,
yeah.
Sweet. All right, so this first one is from Tabitha Powledge from onscience.com. It's a blog. It's the DNA episode. Apparently there's been a big spat over the hot field of epigenetics. And if people aren't familiar, the reason the Human Genome Project, when it mapped the human genome, right, your blueprint, the reason it didn't quite pan out to cure disease and help athletes and do all these different things is because parts of the blueprint get turned on and off, right? And that's called epigenetics. So I'm not going to bore you with histones and methylation and all these processes by which this happens, but the point is epi means upon. So there's a system upon your genes that kind of selects which ones are really getting activated. And that's why just having the map wasn't the cure-all, end-all, be-all thing. Anyway, there's been this big spat recently. Apparently there was an article that came out in the New Yorker, I think, and there was a lot of controversy because I think the guy was misinterpreting some of what epigenetics is or can do or whatever, but there's other parts to this that I want to get to. So I'm going to skip to some other parts of this article here. One is called Americans Don't Want to Be Better, with a question mark. It says the media treatment of the new Pew study, there's been this new survey, that most Americans are freaked out by nascent biohacking techniques for human improvement, emphasize people's fears of gene editing and designer babies rather than other possibilities. So in other words, what they did was they asked some people about, what's it like to enhance ourselves. In fact, when I was a doc student, I did an independent study called The Ethics of Enhancing Ourselves. And so I looked into the future of gene doping. And honestly, I was writing stuff about gene doping all the way back in the late 90s, which was very early on. But anyway, the point being here, it says, Pew asked about implanted brain chips to enhance concentration and information processing. Honestly, that sounds fascinating to me. Be super smart. And transfusions of synthetic blood to increase strength and stamina. It says 4,700 survey respondents were split almost evenly on whether or not they would want gene editing, even for something like to reduce a baby's risk of serious disease. Now, wow, that really disturbs me. Half of all people wouldn't want to, take a baby that could potentially be mentally retarded or have a lethal disease, and if you could just edit one gene with an injection and fix him, they don't want that. But I don't know. People, a lot of people think that's playing with God, sort of. Anyway, so half of people support something like that, but it says 2/3 of them opposed things like the chips to enhance your cognition and the synthetic blood to make you stronger or have more stamina. So it's almost like they're wary, like 50-50 against even using gene treatments for disease, but 2/3 of them oppose the performance enhancing. Like once you go above normal, people start to get salty, right?
Yeah, it's it's good in one area, but it's not good in the other, and it's the exact same thing.
Right. It's okay to make subnormal up to normal, but even though you're moving in the same direction from normal to supernormal, that part is not okay. And I find that actually odd.
Go ahead.
Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
it's kind of like what they've done over the years with like the IOC and always really changing the testosterone to epitestosterone ratios. Like it used to be years ago.
Yep.
Yeah, it used to be like 4-to-1, and then it was like 10-to-1 and 8-to-1, and they just keep changing it. And the reason is because over time, a lot of our biological and genetic variations of testosterone and what we can do, nutrition wise or even pharmacologically speaking to enhance it, like all those things change. And how we perform changes. So like in one respect, they have to change it, but it's like, okay, somebody could just be genetically way out of the norm, be such an outlier that, they're forced to change those types of things. So, I can understand it in one respect, but yeah, it's just, a lot of it's just politics.
Yeah. This says, there's some speculation from Tabitha, the author of this here. She says, there may be less fear about genetic enhancements compared to, the synthetic blood or the brain implants, nervous system implants, because the latter two are actually very new ideas. They're artificial, they're implanted. It's sort of a newer concept. Whereas apparently, she says that at least it's possible that people are slowly getting more familiar with the genetic therapy, gene transfections, for enhancements, and maybe that's why they're a little less weirded out by some of the gene enhancements compared to the implants and the fake blood and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Now, this is interesting. It says women tend to be more suspicious of any of these enhancements than men, and not surprisingly, people with strong religious commitments were more leery of these technologies. And again, I think sort of along the lines of tampering with nature, God's work and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So, I don't know. I think that's interesting. It's like, to me, it's like sports nutrition, right? Clinical nutrition takes sick people up to normal, and sports nutrition, the whole purpose of it, I think, is to take average people and make them better than average. It's the same. You're still moving in the positive direction. Mm-hmm. And you know what? To me, it really begs the question. And when I took that course, it's partly self-designed course actually, but we have to define what normal is then. And like you were saying, John, like the testosterone to epitestosterone ratio that they use to do drug testing, as some guys come along and they're just sort of freaks and they just have, altered ratios, they have to start to adjust their norms, Yeah. So I don't know. That's the real scary part. We start getting into movies like Gattaca and stuff like that. Like what's normal? Like what's acceptable? I don't know. And then this kind of bleeds into the third portion of this before I turn it over to John here. Gene doping at the upcoming Summer Olympics. It says further on this topic, they talk about this guy, John Horgan, who's at, I think it's a blog, I'm not sure, called Crosscheck. anyway, examined the question of whether Olympic athletes are using gene doping to enhance their performance. And he goes on to explain that gene doping was a term invented in 2004 by the geneticist Lee Sweeney. It says athletes got very interested a decade after Sweeney inserted the IGF-1 gene into mice, and their strength went up by as much as 27%. Oof.
Damn, nice.
Can you imagine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Just like you said, Lottie. I mean, like you written about it even like in the '90s, but it just takes several years for people to kind of coin the term. Like I remember, like in the mid 2000s, actually seeing some of the first review articles on gene doping, and there's actually quite a few. Like Sports Med has had many really excellent review articles on gene doping, and some even other higher tier types of journals as well.
Well, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, they have an annual conference about it that they started a few years ago because they're taking it seriously in order to stay ahead, of what's coming down. Now, this guy, Tabitha is reporting on what this Horgan guy is saying. He says not to worry. Apparently, we shouldn't worry because even after more than 2,000 trials of gene therapy, its track record of success is nearly non-existent. Now, I'm not sure I agree with that. There are gene therapy trials right now, and there have been for over a decade. So I'm not saying that it's an explosion of success because the guy makes a point in here. If once it gets done safely, that's actually going to be a cause for celebration because that means we can actually start to fix some of these diseases. I mean, if athletes are using it effectively to be bigger, stronger, faster, then that means we can start to help a lot of sick people as well. The only thing I'm not sure I agree with is he's saying it's not really something to be concerned with in the near future, and I think we're farther along than he thinks. That's all. That's all. When I see stuff like glowing mice because they inserted the luciferase gene into them, the firefly butt glowing gene, and then the mice glow. I mean, that's proof of concept, baby. You can put a gene in there. The thing for me is really how localized is this going to be? At one point, because I was reading some stuff that it might actually have local effects. Like you have lagging calves, you put a shot in your calf, and boom, big gastroc. But of course, the risk would be that uncontrolled protein synthesis would be a nightmare. Cancer, enlarged heart and organs. You know what I mean? It'd have to be very specific to muscle tissue and maybe temporary. I don't know how temporary, but
that has been the big poo-poo that I've heard about IGF-1 is that it's a great on signal, but it's an on signal for everything. Is the bad thing. So non-localized use, it could potentially just turn, you have dormant cancer cells or whatnot. Well, not anymore.
No, exactly.
They just got a massive on signal.
Yeah.
So,
John, man, are you eating? Are you digging into a bag of something?
No, I'm not eating at all, actually.
Okay. So it sounded like somebody's eating.
Yeah.
I guess that's the risk. You listen to Iron Radio, that's the risk. Somebody's going to be eating. I don't know.
Yeah, are you eating, Phil, or
no.
snacking? Oh, okay, that's weird.
Yeah,
I'm not eating
don't
anything.
know.
That's weird.
Okay.
I wish I was eating.
You're right, me too. Anyway, no, good point, Phil, about that, right? That was always a concern. IGF-1 or GH was that, you're indiscriminately growing tissues, and you're going to end up with tumors and, all kinds of scary stuff. And I think it's the same thing with the gene doping. Some of the pictures that I've seen of dogs, not so much the cow, but the dog with a myostatin blocked, dog.
Yeah, you've seen those.
It's almost sad. Like he's like a greyhound. He has no body fat and he has ridiculous muscle mass, but so much so that it's hanging off of him like saddlebags. And I'm like, oh, but he almost looks sad. I don't want that, And I've said this for years on this show, but the quest for size is over in a lot of ways, especially once we can do that, right? What made it exciting in the 80s and 90s was it was this sort of arms race. It was like a size race, and some people could get bigger than others, and now, even on stage, I doubt it's gene doping, but with the advances in pharmacy, the guys are so enormous that they start looking like each other. I've gone on about it before, sort of cookie cutter look, and how do you even it's not like, oh, here's Tom Platz on stage with the big legs, and here's the aesthetic smaller Frank Zane, and here's Arnold who's taller with the peaked biceps and the huge pecs.
Yeah,
everybody's kind of the same.
Most of them.
Yeah, I don't know. That's maybe why I'm a little less interested in keeping up on every muscle mag these days. Muscle and Fitness and Flex, and I don't even know if Muscle Mag International that Rob used to write for. I don't even know if they're still.
They went out of business a couple years ago.
Okay,
because I wrote for them for about a year and a half, like late 2013 and all of 2014, and and so they went out of business. And Muscle and Performance Mag, which is online and in print, because you can buy those print magazines at like Vitamin Shop. They create new articles, and they've taken some articles like from Muscle Mag and kind of turned them over and redone them and all that stuff.
Because I had heard that Muscle Mag was rebought. There was a couple of false starts about that, but maybe that's what happened. It just got sort of reinvented partly into something else. I don't know.
Yeah, and then like I've written for Iron Man several times, so they've been out on back for about, I don't know, year and a half or so.
Oh yeah, Iron Man is the only magazine that I have not written for. I think of the big ones. I even did some stuff for Muscle and Fitness Hers once or twice. It's just it's a little embarrassing, but don't you laugh, because I think you've done that too, haven't you?
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's good. I like all that stuff. It's good.
Okay, yeah, it is. Well, and let's face it.
So,
there's so many gurus and stuff. I think it's really important to have some people who know what they're actually saying when they write an article. They're not presenting opinion like it's fact.
Right.
Anyway, okay, yeah.
Right, so our next news blurb actually has to do with caffeine, and we've talked about caffeine quite extensively here on the show. And this came out actually in this month's issue of Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. Caffeine attenuates decreases in leg power without increased muscle damage. So this is from Ribeiro and colleagues. And so caffeine ingestion, we know, has a very large ergogenic effect. And may also obviously increases exercise capacity. And when you can increase the exercise capacity, you can potentially train at higher degrees of intensity. So this was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, and when you, just so people understand, when you deal in research supplements, the best route to go in terms of a study and design is randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled. So it means that the investigators nor the subjects really know which intervention that they get. Nobody knows if they get a placebo or the actual caffeine in and of itself. So they actually had a low subject count. They had 6 male handball athletes. We've never heard that one before. Handball athletes. So they did a placebo or caffeine. The caffeine was only 6 milligrams per kg. Capsules on 2 different occasions, so 60 minutes after ingestion of the capsules. Caffeine levels were evaluated. They did vertical jumps. They did 4 sets of 30 seconds of continuous vertical jumps with 60 seconds of recovery between sets. Blood lactate and creatine kinase, which is a kind of a main indirect marker of muscle damage, was determined before and after the protocol. They found significant differences in caffeine levels between the two groups. Caffeine elicited a little over 5% improvement in leg power compared with placebo.
That sounds about right, yep.
Yeah, that's definitely correct. And so the caffeine trial displayed higher blood lactates compared with the placebo. After protocol and vertical jumps, no difference in creatine kinase was observed between either group. So it indicates that immediate ingestion of caffeine, we're only talking about 6 milligrams per kg, can reduce levels of muscle fatigue, preserve leg power during the test, and increase lactate responses potentially. So no increase in muscle damage, but an increase at 6 milligrams of caffeine certainly has an improvements on performance, and you can maybe train at high intensity. This is the stuff that we've talked about a lot on the show, particularly with you, Lonnie, on all your caffeine research that you've done. This study, while it adds value to the literature, is really no surprise, right? I mean, you're not really going to find a lot of studies, however they go about doing it with design, with caffeine, that don't show some type of positive effect, right?
And you know what, too? Well, let me add this. One thing is, I am not ripping on the authors, Rubiero and colleagues, but I was almost surprised this got to print when I first read it because, like you said, it's not a surprise. A 6 milligram per kg dose is a pretty standard performance-enhancing dose. A 5 to 10% improvement in power, pretty standard. I mean, this stuff is already in the literature. And why would you think caffeine would increase muscle damage? But I will concede this. Then I thought, but it's true. If you routinely use caffeine and you get that super training effect and you're balls to the wall 5 or 10% more than normal, it does stand to reason that maybe you do more damage and you need more recovery because you did more work, right?
Right, but so why could you, it's like, that's the why. It's kind of like the how. Well, I mean, when you ingest caffeine, I mean, just like you said, 6 milligrams per kg is fairly standard. Your level of perceived exertion is going to be higher, so you're going to want to train at a little higher intensity. So you have the potential to have more damage. I mean, if you're just going in there and doing, just an arm workout, you may not get as much muscle damage if you did like, eccentrics and legs and stuff like that. So it's certainly, muscle group and kind of upper or lower body dependent. But yeah, it's really not much of a surprise with that study. And they only had 6 subjects.
John, I have been seeing that a lot lately. I just reviewed a paper, and I can't talk about it yet, of course, but they had 3 of each gender in the study, and that's it. And I'm like, not to sound like a statistician policeman here, but that's an inadequate sample. Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand sometimes research is expensive or even painful, and you can't just run through dozens or hundreds of subjects. Because, you always hear that. Like, I'll hear clinical people sometimes. I've heard a lot of dietitians say, oh, the sample size is too small. I'm like, you do it. There's a lot to this here.
But the thing is...
But that's so small. Are you... Because, when you said randomized, by the way, people, that's how researchers get to... I can take a smaller sample, and in this case, it reflects, hopefully, all handball players, in that... Or my research, all, barbell trainers... is because if you do it, the idea of randomization is that it's randomly plucked from the population of interest, like a handball player or a lifter, and that helps make it, a valid representation of the whole target population, right? That's why it's randomized like that. But at the same time, I don't know. I would always be worried. In fact, a lot of times I stop at the abstract level. I present a poster and just move on because I'm like, we had a grand total of like, less than a dozen people in this little pilot study, and it could be sampling error. You could have an unfortunate string of events that make something look like it's happening, but you could have a couple of freaks on your hands, to put it bluntly. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out why they had such a low subject pool when caffeine has such a significant and positive ergogenic effect. It's like people would almost be, trampling over each other to be in the study when they can use caffeine.
And low risk, low risk, right? High performance, low risk output. Yeah. I don't know. Interesting.
Anyhow, but
well, it is a good point. It's a good point. Like, I doubt, Phil, and you guys at your gym, I doubt that you think, oh, well, we're caffeinated, so we put in 5% more work, so we have to do something different with our recovery because we might have more muscle damage. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound like it's very rubber hits the road practical, maybe, but anyway, yeah, it's still cool though. I mean, coffee and caffeine, now not caffeine per se, but coffee has a lot of antioxidants and other things that would actually help with muscle recovery. That's one of the reasons I've really moved more toward coffee. I had an old mentor. She's like, Lowry, why don't you do some of these, military caffeine gums that are much stronger than the regular commercial gums, or straight anhydrous caffeine, do something more potent. I'm like, because coffee's not just liquid caffeine. Coffee's not boring as long as you get some, like the stuff that's naturally high in caffeine, feel like that stuff that you're selling now.
Yeah.
That'll kick your ass.
Yeah.
And it's not just the caffeine. Yes, that's the main player. But still, I mean, when you take a caffeine pill, it makes you temporarily mildly insulin resistant, and that doesn't help your muscle recovery. But coffee, at least not acutely, but in the long haul, it seems to improve, like glucose, carbohydrate deposition into your muscles and all that kind of stuff. So, I don't know. Anyway, All right, fellas, let's go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk about bringing up lagging body parts. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks.
Hi, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry, and on behalf of Phil and Rob, I'd just like to let listeners know that if you love us or you hate us, we'd like you to leave a comment or perhaps vote for us on iTunes. It helps us out quite a bit on the popularity side of things. You can also follow Dr. Lowry, me, on Twitter. It's Lawnman7 on Twitter if you want to do that. We also have a Facebook page, the Iron Radio listeners page. So whether it's leaving a comment or voting for us or following us on Twitter or Facebook, that would be fantastic. Also, occasionally Rob or myself will write an article for another website, and Phil will as well. So lots of ways to interact, follow us in other media, and vote for us and keep things going strong on Iron Radio. Thanks.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more, that's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
Okay, everybody, we are back, and we are going to talk about your forever lagging body parts and how to address those. I don't know. One of the interesting things to me about lagging areas or weak areas or whatever you want to call it is the fact that once you fix one, you have a new one. So it's this never-ending quest for fixing. That's true. Which is kind of neat. I mean, but it goes along the lines of you can never win. I mean, once you fix something, now something else is behind. But yeah, I mean, just go into just some specifics, I guess.
Right. Like I think it's good to start with why does this happen? And I think maybe that most obvious one is genetics. Like I used to know a guy, Scott. I won't give you his last name, obviously, but Scott was very built dude, not natural, but his arms were always small. And I mean, of all the things you can have small as a bodybuilder, man, that one hurts. Don't get me wrong. I know we champion a lot of thick back, heavy torso. Because arms aren't going to make you look thick. I mean, you think about male models; they can have kind of big pecs and big arms, but they still look like you could blow them over in a breeze. And not very powerful. But at the same time, so his arms lagged, and he's like, "What am I gonna do?" And in one sense, maybe it is genetic. There are certain muscle shape things about like the insertion. Is it like your biceps are real short? Well, maybe you're lucky in that you'll get a high peak out of it. But what if they're just short and you don't have a high peak? So I think genetics are probably part of that.
lifestyle is a huge one I see now. A giant one. I mean,
like
I see people come in daily with a not a body part, but half their body severely lacking. The part that's behind you.
No doubt.
And
right, yeah.
from daily life, from so much sitting and being at computers. So they're severely internally rotated. They've got really strong quads, weak glutes, weak hamstrings, weak back in general. So
yeah, they see their pecs. So
great points. You look at all the just the conglomerates of just like in the advertising and marketing, the millions of dollars that go into advertising and about low back pain. And I'm not saying low back pain does not exist. Of course it exists, and it's certainly multi-layered. But one of the things that one of the common thread for all those things, and not even in a lot of studies, and certainly not all, but especially the ones that are advertised like on TV, nobody ever talks about the underlying powerful effect of just resistance training, and how it just, and particularly as you get more trained and as you get older, 40s, 50s, 60s, it's like if you start earlier in life, then you're going to continue it, but it's going to be really the closest thing to the fountain of youth that you're probably ever going to really get to, aside from maybe growth hormone and, and some other types of things. But anyway, but yeah, it's just like nobody ever talks about resistance training. I mean, everybody is just so weak. Just like you said, Phil, like weak glutes, weak hams, weak low back. And,
John,
and it's like,
let me insert something. I thought about having an episode, and it would be very hard to do this without sounding arrogant. I mean, all of us, but having an episode about how average weakness can motivate you. It's like being motivated by, sometimes you see somebody in the gym, you're like, oh my God, I got to go train back because he's so weak. I don't know. It's just, like I said, it sounds terrible. It's a good thing we're perfect, right? But, and I say that tongue in cheek. But yeah, sometimes you're almost motivated by that. Like people, they like you walk around and you see a man or a woman's leg, and it's so soft and sort of cellulite looking, like you could poke your finger in up to the second knuckle. There's no muscle tone at all. And in a way, that's bizarrely motivating to me. And I sorry for the sidebar, but I thought maybe we'll do a show on that at some point, because that can almost disgust you to the point that you get pissed off and go in the gym so you don't end up like that. I don't know. Anyway,
speaking of, like we were talking about, working on our weaknesses, and I'm gonna hit up some stuff here in a second. But Mike Nelson, who's another co-host, for this show, he sent out a little email to some of us, and he said one of his students said that they were going to go increase the athlete's posterior delt power as the main focus of the program by doing lateral raises.
Send him to Phil or you. You guys need to sit these guys down.
Yeah.
Damn.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it depends on what types of people that you're working with. For older individuals, and some people just need to increase like total body strength. I think one of the better approaches to do is to kind of start globally and work the fundamental movement patterns and see what do some type of an assessment and see where they're weak at first, and it usually gives you a pretty good indicator of where you may need to start in some of their programs.
Exactly.
Some people just can't squat, and I've worked with a lot of people, and a lot of people just, still to this day, even some athletes, and I have no idea, I still can't explain this, like I don't understand how people just do not know how to fucking box squat and actually just like sit back with their hips and really just extend back, because Phil, this too. Most people squat to a box. They don't box squat, and they're two different things, but they use them interchangeably. And it's mind boggling. So I think, starting off with assessments and just doing just fundamental, body weight movements. If you can't body weight squat, then you need to go to, regress it back and just do like assisted squats, like with a TRX or goblet squat or something like that. But so it just depends on what people's goals are. But I think some of the top areas for weakness of most people, and we just touched on this, glutes, hammies, low back. And I think a really good thing to do, and I talked to a lot of lifters about this, and I do this myself. I do about a 2-to-1, sometimes a 3-to-1 ratio of back posterior work to anterior work. And I do anywhere from about 200 to 250 reps a week just with back work alone.
I think it
and
feels like that too.
so it's just you need to do 2 to 1 or maybe 3 to 1 ratio of posterior to anterior work.
I agree. I mean, that's what we do. If we're doing any kind of pressing, we usually do about double that in rows. And you're not talking matching intensity to intensity, but volume.
Yes.
Generally, we
volume.
get a lot of volume in for the back. And then just weak areas in general. If somebody has a weak area, it's just add a little more in consistently over time for that area. Everybody wants I need to fix it in 4 days. Well, that's not going to happen. Over the next 6 months, let's say you have lagging calves. That's a usual one for people. Try doing some calf work a little bit every day.
I just posted it. I just posted about that yesterday on my Instagram, and a lot of people say, well, my calves aren't big. I don't have genetically big calves, or my calves don't grow. It's because they're not focusing on greater times under tension, and they're not manipulating like the upper and lower portion of the rep. And so what you can do is try doing like iso holds, whether it's seated or standing calf raises. And you can even do this just with body weight alone. Sometimes you may not even need any weight. You can just do iso holds at the bottom for like 3 to 5 seconds, or do an eccentric of 3 to 5 seconds going down and an iso hold. But I would strongly suggest and recommend that you just do one or the other first, because you're really going to be sore especially if you've never really done it before. And obviously, you're not going to do as much volume. But when you talk about like force absorbing properties, with the calf musculature, it's always about the Achilles tendon. And so a lot of times you can kind of do iso holds to kind of ease off those force absorbing properties, and you'll actually find over time that your calves will actually start to kind of grow and take on a mind of its own.
Yeah, let me get in on this a little bit. On the assessment side of things, I agree. If you look at someone's biomechanics and whatnot, you can kind of get the form follows function, and now I'm thinking more from a bodybuilder perspective, because maybe they legitimately do need to bring up their traps and rear delts or something like that. You know what I mean? For a more powerful look or whatever. But I think as part of the assessment, you got to do the psychological assessment too. Like, the readiness to change. It's called the Prochaska model. There's different ways, to talk about this. And that's to try to, sit down with the person and get the idea. Are they psychologically, are they behaviorally avoiding back work or arm work or calf work because they're small in these areas? It's natural to want to go into the gym if you've got a huge chest or big arms and just do t-shirt workouts every day, t-shirt muscles, and it's like, well, sometimes you got to have the discipline to, like Phil said, just keep adding that volume. That was one of the things I wrote down. I mean, you guys have already mentioned 2 things that I would focus on: eccentric work, right? Negatives, because it's so micro traumatizing and muscle remodeling, and volume. Phil said something, God, I think it was like a year or 2 ago, and it sticks in my head that, Phil, you said something like, let's face it, if you do 10 sets of 10 curls every time you go into the gym, provided there's adequate recovery, you're going to grow. Don't tell me that's not going to grow. Yeah. And it's a good example of extreme importance of volume. Yeah. You've got to add the volume. And I like what you said, John, about stretching in the bottom position and stuff like that, because that alone turns on, muscle growth in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
like
but you can do
reps,
that with Yeah, you can do that with almost any type of exercise that you're talking about. And so some people just don't know how to manipulate. You can manipulate so many different variables, and most people try to just manipulate too many at one time. Do like 1 or 2, or maybe different areas of the body, or maybe try the same exercise but manipulate different parts of the range of motion.
Right.
I mean, you'd be surprised like how difficult it is. I mean, even something like with like lat pull downs or neutral grip or narrow grip, like hold at the top for a second, or hold at the bottom for like a second or two count. I mean, you'd be shocked at what that actually really does.
Well, for me, it's like mind in the muscle. Like when I'm doing calf work, I naturally do that. I'll bounce in the bottom. We've talked about that before. Watch old Tom Platt's videos, how he's squeezing it mid-range or at the top, or bouncing in the bottom. And you're right. I mean, whether it's eccentrics or some isometric squeezes or even rep speed. I read a paper years ago that stuck in my mind about the activation of like the biceps versus like the brachialis or brachioradialis I think it was in like a preacher curl or a Scott curl. I don't remember the specifics, but the point was different cadence, different speed of contraction seemed to cause the EMG, the activation to be different. And so there's even, variations in speed. So I think various angles, different speeds, all this stuff is very handy. And I think any good coach is going to give you that variety, right? Just like variety is a principle in nutrition, I think it's a principle in lifting too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to go back to the assessment thing. I mean, we can't avoid the fact that we have a lot of people come in and they're like, I have this or that weak area, and they're just weak. When you're just not in shape, you don't have a weak area, and there's that whole group of people, which probably sadly is about 85% of the population.
That's
at
a
least.
They jump. They
just need to freaking move.
Yes,
they don't need to do
right?
concentration curls. They need to move their whole damn body.
Right. No, that's funny. They jump to, I have a lagging body part. No, you are lagging. You are globally, like John said, globally you lag. That's harsh. That's bitter medicine, Phil. But no, it's got to be.
But I think like as you get. Because I'm a big fan of the conjugate method and conjugate training system, and I've been doing that for the last several years. And I think as you become more trained, and that's somewhat arbitrary. I mean, you could be training for 10, 12, 15 years and really not be highly trained. So, but when you're really highly trained, I think you have to do more variation over a more frequent period of time, like within week, bi-weekly, even over the course of a 3 to 4 week training cycle. You need more variation. And I'm not saying that you have to do a different exercise for every day that you go into the gym. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the variation in terms of really more of the assistance exercises, because like on upper body days, I do 2 back exercises, and even on lower body days, I always do 1. Sometimes I'll do 2 as well. But you're always kind of switching out back exercises, is because when you get more highly trained, you adapt quicker. And so, you could change assistance exercises every like 3 to 4 weeks, or even just a different assistance exercise for the same muscle group, whenever you go in the gym. But novice and intermediate athletes and trainees, they don't really need to do that. And this whole notion of novice, intermediate, and advanced trainees, especially on the lower end of the scale, this whole notion of, well, they need to deload for like a whole week. Look, folks, if you're training twice a week, why the fuck are you deloading? Okay? Like, you don't need to do that. You have like 5 other days in the week where you have recovery. So, even if you train like 4 days a week, you still have 3 other days of recovery. Now, a lot of that is very detailed and it's customized, to the person depending on like what they're doing.
It is, yeah.
But yeah. I mean, if you're training twice a week and you're somebody who likes to, get in and get out within 45 minutes to an hour because you have to go to work and you have families and got kids, like there's no reason to really deload. At all, especially if it's like maybe 2 or 3 days a week. But, you get into the upper echelons of, 5, 6, 7 days a week, especially if you're on the top collegiate or maybe, Olympic lifting platform, Olympic athletes, then yes, you need to have, planned, obviously recovery days, but even just kind of like a purposeful, like overreaching so you can kind of really get into super compensation. I know that's a different topic, but, the whole notion of like, deloading, like I don't really take weeks off anymore unless I'm on, vacation, where there's not much of a gym or something like that, or, coming off of a contest. Even though I train like 4 days a week, I still have 3 other days of recovery. But, okay, if I do take a deload, I still train maybe 3 days a week, but the volume and intensity is about half of what it was.
So this to pull this back to lagging body parts, it's like what Phil was saying, and you too, that globally you're just undertrained. You know, it's one thing to fuss about, I'm weak in this or that, but you're right. And I know what you're saying, not training a body part twice a week, but just going in period twice a week, and then you're fussing about weak body parts. You know, you are not at a frequency level yet, a volume level, to even think, I think, probably about targeting. I mean, unless you have an injury, but I'm just thinking more along the lines of visually weak, you know, visually lagging in size, or what are you doing? You know, you're not lifting enough. The volume requirement isn't there. And you know what? You might have to put in more volume for that genetically stubborn group, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, because Phil talked about volume, and it's like, well, if you have a lagging or weak muscle group, it's likely, and the odds are you got to do even more volume, especially on the front end, or even to maintain a higher volume for those lagging and weak body parts or areas, you know, to really kind of step up their game in a sense, to really have performance increases kind of across the board, right? Yeah. So a lot of times you have to do more volume up front, and some people feel like they have to, if they're doing 3 sets with something, well, they got to push it up to like 15. I'm like, no, you know, just double it, maybe, or even just add a set or two. Yeah. You know, like
that's
if
practical.
It's 3, well, then do 5. Well, then do 5 sets for several weeks, you know, and then go up to maybe 6, or even if you want to go to 12, you know, sets, then you can break it up throughout the week, you know. So it's just there's multiple ways to really do it.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, people are stupid. You know, I mean, flat out. It's like the people that come in, they're like, man, my squat sucks. I squat 1 day a week, this and that, so I'm going to try squatting 7 days a week. Oh, you're going to go from 1 day to 7?
Right.
Let's try 2. You know?
Yeah.
And then we can go from there. Everybody wants, and it's just like when people go on a diet, you know, they go from eating Twinkies and Hoes to nothing but broccoli and chicken breasts. It's like there's steps in between.
Right.
You know, let's try
Absolutely.
that. Let's try something maintainable.
Right.
And okay, let's see what you get. I mean, this is where I definitely fall in line with Windler's attitude. It's like, I want to do as little as I can to get the maximum benefit. You know, I mean, that's just smart. You know? Find out the minimum you can get away with to still make progress to your goals, and then do that forever.
And that takes years. That takes years to be able to get to.
Yeah, and it's like, now I'm just going to continue this for infinity.
Well, because then you go from inadequate volume, like the 2 days a week, like John was saying, to every single day. And if you've got a weak body part, you could be overtraining it, making it flat and glycogen depleted and stringy looking. You know, it's you know, because you're jumping to the other extreme.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Then you're mad because you're injured and you hurt all the time.
Well, injured? Yeah.
No. So.
I just wanted to add one thing too. Is we'd be remiss, I think, if we didn't talk about, when we talk about body parts as opposed to muscles. Some body parts are very complex and some just aren't as much. And like when you guys mentioned back. Like, some the biggest muscles on your upper body are in your back, lats, traps, and they have multiple origins and assertion kind of points. And when you look at that, and so it really begs for variety, accessory work. You know, I would encourage listeners to go back and look for the episode with Joey Antonio, more than a year ago, and he was talking about how you activate satellite cells. You know, baby. Muscle cells that wake up, stem cells that wake up and help change the size, or maybe even the shape of a muscle a little bit by hitting it from different angles and that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to throw that out there, right? Your biceps is a pretty straightforward, you know.
Talk about muscle architecture like for a second, because you said some muscles are very simple, right, in their architecture and their insertion points. And then you have a muscle like glute medius, right? So it's actually glute medius is a major abductor of the thigh, but their anterior fibers actually help to rotate the hip medially, and its posterior fibers help to rotate the hip laterally. So sometimes even in a given muscle, their fiber arrangements can be different, have different effects on movement patterns, and so.
Right. No. Right on. Okay. Well, I know Phil's got to get, so no, that's good stuff. There's a lot to chew on, but I think some of the advice that you guys said about pick one of these things and do it for several months at least, instead of trying to get too fancy with different cadence, isometric, eccentric, more volume, more frequency, pick something and kind of latch onto that and see if you can't get some changes.
Yeah, and as before we wrap up, the Rio 2000 Summer 16 Olympic ceremony was last night, and it's going on for the next 17 days. So if you need some inspiration in how to increase your gains and swollenness in life, then look no further to the Olympics.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And the Russians aren't there.
Right? No,
Hey,
that's right.
Some of them are, but a lot of them are not.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. Until next week.
All right, see ya. Hey listeners, have you seen the store at ironradio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.